On today's episode, we have the brilliant Lolita Himes, who is known on Instagram on her huge following as Sassy Black Social Worker. And she is phenomenal, folks. This is one you don't want to miss. She's talking about belonging in public schools, something that has just been really a national phenomenon in many ways, in terms of like how scary it is and how different it is for kids nowadays, and for teachers and for staff and administrators in public schools. So she is an expert. She really is. She might not call herself that, but I am, because she has taught me so much in our conversations together. And I've learned just a tremendous amount of what it's like to be up close on a day-to-day basis in the public schools. She's a social worker. She's there for her students. She has learned to cultivate love and kindness and insight and wonder in the school system again, in her little world where she lives. And she is lovely and generous enough to share her insight with humor and just with fun and with tremendous call to actions on her social media on Instagram. So let's get into it and have this great conversation with Lolita today. We have a new friend of mine on the show today, Lolita Himes. And Lolita and I met a few months ago, actually in person through a mutual friend was my best friend in college. And Lisa, her name's Lisa, and is Lolita's best friend now. And we were kind of following each other around on social. And I said, oh, this person seems really, really cool and up my alley, and a kindred spirit I could feel in you. Before we even talked, I felt a connection very, very quickly. I genuinely mean that. And you'll hear me say that on the show, right, about other folks. And listen, the reason why is because I only really sit and chat with people that I feel that way about. But there was something, just an extra little spice of something in there that felt familiar, really, really familiar. And when we met in person, it was kind of funny because I was fangirling. I was like, oh my gosh, Lolita. I really was. And I was so excited all day to be able to meet you in person. And so when my family and I went out to Chicago this summer, where your neck of the woods, when we went out there, and I was like, Lisa, I got to meet up with you. And she's like, Lolita can come over too. And we all got together, and it felt like a family reunion. It just felt like, and our kids were there, and it was just really, really great. And I think one of the things that really struck me so deeply right away, Lolita, is that this sense of having a spirit of education in us, like that educator core central part of us that's also rooted not just in wanting to support people in their learning, but also really wrapped in a heart of service. And I sense that so deeply from you, not just from the way that you show up in your spirit and in your being, but in the things that you were actually talking about too. And so for me, I could not think of anyone else that I want to have this conversation around today with belonging in public schools. I have kids, you have kids. If not, we all have children in our lives or kids in our lives that we love, whether it's cousins, siblings, nieces, nephews, or, our children of our siblings. And for us, it's all of us who have these loved ones of folks who are part of the public school system, whether it's children, staff, faculty, administrators. It's been tough these days. It's been tough these last, couple of decades, I would say 3 decades or so, at least, if not more, with the public school system and just schools in general. So I really am excited to talk with you with your being a social worker for so long now in the public schools. And I welcome you on the show. And thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you. It is an honor being here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, look, how long have you been doing this? How long have you been a social worker in the public schools? Just tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so this is actually my 20th year as a school social worker. And I've worked in schools in New Jersey. And then the last 15 years, I've been working in schools throughout Chicagoland. The current school I'm at, I've been here for 10 years. And I think this is my stopping point, so that's really good. I work for an amazing school district, so I'm really happy and I'm really lucky that I work for a school that really cares and is so student-centered.
Mm.
But the reason I wanted to become into the education system as a school social worker is because when I was in high school, and I won't dare tell what year that was because I wouldn't want to age myself. But when I was in high school, there were no school social workers, right? We had our guidance counselors, our counselors who just kind of helped us along the way academically. But there was no one for me to go to when I was experiencing any type of emotional distress. So school in general was never a place of belonging for me, right? I never felt this sense of connection with school. And most importantly, I didn't feel like emotional safety in school, which led me into my journey of becoming a school social worker. And so I just love what I do so much. I feel incredibly blessed and honored to have a job that I love so much. And every day I'm just here and I show up for students. I'm showing up for students who don't have someone to show up for them outside of school. And our students spend so many hours here a day that it is just so important to have a sense of belonging to your school community. Otherwise, we're just going to see all kind of issues that we want to avoid.
It's so true, because that reflection that you're sharing about, how you didn't feel that sense of connection in your environment in school growing up, it really shapes the way that it can be a big part of how we see our childhood experiences. Like, oh, I had a great childhood, or my childhood wasn't that great. A lot of that is influenced by our experiences in the school system, whether or not we have a great connection with our families. So some people could say, hey, my parents were really great, but I just didn't have a great childhood. It could be something like that. And then when we don't have those connections within our family system as well, or our environments outside of school, then that just further impacts that sense of disconnect or that isolation that we're feeling. And that can be, there's that old saying that you go through childhood and then you spend the rest of your life getting over it, and I know that can be cynical for some folks. We're Gen Xers, so, maybe we go down that road a little bit sometimes, but that can really be true for a lot of folks. And I think so much of that can be influenced by the type of experiences that they're having within the school system. And that's not just high school. That can be, that can start from actually like preschool on. And I know that was true for me as well. Just this feeling of isolation that's also led to not just being in the mental health field, but this kind of obsession that I have with the human experience and the sense of belonging. And so I think that can resonate so much for really deeply for many of us. And it sounds like this is also what keeps you coming back every day. Yeah.
And especially what's important too, as a Black woman, is for my Black students to see me, right? I was in a school system where I didn't see teachers that looked like me. I didn't have teachers that looked like me. And we know that students who have teachers and educators and staff that look like them, they're going to be more successful. They're going to have a more sense of connectedness. And so I unapologetically show up for my Black students who come to us every day with so many different needs and issues. And it's just really important for them to see me, and especially as someone who can support them socially and emotionally. So I often hold a very special space in my day for student groups and student just meetings with Black students who just have someone who sees them and understands them. Oftentimes, students of color in general often feel invisible in the classroom. So we know that when students have teachers who look like them, they feel a more belonging in the school, a more sense of connectedness, and they're likely to be more engaging.
Yeah, because seeing ourselves reflected, our identities reflected in other folks around us whom we respect or might aspire to certain positions and didn't even know that we could, having people in roles or even protective kind of roles, right? Or supportive type of roles who share our identities, there is this sense of being seen, being embraced or understood deeply right away. And seeing you in that position, there is a power there in being a social worker. There's a significant amount of power in that role. And seeing you in that position is also, for many students, I imagine, for many Black students, I imagine, a celebration of their heritage. And when we look at like universal belonging, I'm just realizing maybe for the first time that our heritage, our ethnicity, our connection to our ancestors really sits and lives in that universal belonging aspect, that thing that seems kind of untouchable, this bigger than this microcosm or this little bubble that we're living in. And so having you in the role that you're in, I imagine, is a celebration of universal belonging, creates universal belonging even deeper for the students that you're around. Oh, that's hard with me right now as you're saying that. Because one of the things about you that I love, and this can sit with people however way it wants, and that's fine with me, is that you're unapologetically Black, like really unapologetically Black. And you even have that in your social handle, and you have a huge following on Instagram. It's Sassy Black Social Worker. You have that in your Instagram handle as Sassy Black Social Worker. And that makes me so happy. I mean, the way you're just like, yeah. And this is what it is.
It took a long time, Mona. It took a long time to get to that place where I was courageous enough to show up in my true authenticity, to show up truly who I am. Because for so long, I dimmed my light and I hid behind who I truly was for fear of the continuous microaggressions that I have daily, right? And just knowing the microaggressions that students are experiencing in their classrooms daily, it's important for them to walk into my office and feel this warm and welcoming space. So they're like, oh, okay, she's one of the real ones, right? Because oftentimes we might feel comfort in seeing someone who looks like us. And this is a whole nother podcast, but when we are so steeped into our own whiteness, we don't always show up how people want us to. So I want students, and I want my staff and people who I work with to know that, I'm all about every student, but I am unapologetic in how I show up for my Black and brown students. I fight for racial equity daily.
Well, I think that's part of this podcast, actually, because so many of us, I think most of us are steeped in whiteness. And whiteness is not about being white. It's about a system that is harmful also to white folks, by the way, to many white folks. Which is why we see these incredible high suicide rates for white men, higher than any other population, any other demographic rather. And that's scary. It's this idea of like white patriarchal, hetero, cis normative kind of like standards is really, really harming all of us. And by the way, going back to what you're saying of like trying to kind of hide or dim your light and reduce yourself and minimize and all that as a way to kind of avoid microaggressions, it doesn't really work. It doesn't, at least for me, it didn't. Like the more I tried to like be, I won't say passing, I couldn't really pass, but the more I tried to be white, I would say the worse, the more disconnected I felt from myself. It perpetuated this shame about my identities, and no one was buying it, folks. No one was buying it. If anything, I got more questions about like, what are you, or who are you? Where are you from? That kind of thing. So I don't know if any of that resonates with you. And it's just like,
yeah. And the thing when it comes to students and in education, I just want to say that there are white teachers and teachers who can show up for their students every day, right? It's really about being culturally competent and celebrating every student in your class, having curriculums that celebrate all the students in your class. And, that connecting in the beginning of the school year, in the beginning of each semester with students is so important, because no significant learning cannot happen without significant relationships. So if the kids don't know who the teachers are, and if the teachers don't really care about who they are, the students aren't going to be connected at all. And I don't remember who said this quote, but I remember it, and I say it all the time, that kids don't care about how much you know. until they know how much you care, right?
Mm.
And if they don't have teachers who seem to be connected with them and they're just coming in to teach math, they're coming in to teach science, and they're not spending time building community within the classroom, then those kids aren't going to have that sense of belonging in the classroom.
Yeah, they're not. And that's where they're spending most of the day, so
Hmm.
having that is really paramount. So when with your role, then what is as cliche as this might sound, so forgive me, Cleta, in your role, then what would, this is going to be kind of a joke to even ask, what does a typical work day look like for you in school?
There is no typical day for a school
Yeah.
social worker. There's no set way that a day looks, right? I can come in the morning and see a long list of things on my calendar that schedule, such as IEP meetings, 504 meetings, meetings with teachers, and that can change just in a moment, right? Like I deal with a lot of student crises. Students, unfortunately, are in crises a lot during the school day for various reasons. So, on a typical day, if that's such a thing, when my schedule does allow me to do as it is, I might start off with some one-on-one individual counseling. So I have designated days where I do my individual counseling. And then I also run a variety of social emotional learning groups. One of my favorite groups that I run in the school is called DBT Skills in Schools, where kids are working on dialectical behavior therapy and just learning ways to deal with emotional regulation and distress tolerance, and just learning how to regulate, right? I also push into the classrooms a lot. One of the fun things that I do, and I know it sounds weird to say it as fun, but I love, love, love mental health. And this month, in all of the health classes, I'm pushing into talk to freshmen about suicide awareness and depression. And that's one of my favorite things to do is go into the classroom and do a lot of presentations. I do a lot of professional development for teachers. In addition to that, I'm part of the IEP team. So I sit in on IEPs and 504s, and then just a list of other things, dealing with crisis. If there's a fight, the deans may need me to help assist with that. So it's a lot that goes on in the day of a school social worker. It can definitely be very overwhelming. A lot of my friends and family get really frustrated because when I get in my car, I turn my phone on to not disturb. I literally need to just decompress from the day. There's so much that I see. There's so much that I witness. There's so much that I hold that it's really important for me at the end of the day to just take time for myself, to just center myself so that I could go back and do this all again the next day.
Yeah, and reset that energy, right? It just that physical, mental, emotional, psychological, all that reset is really needed in order to kind of give your spirit that space to really breathe, kind
Mm-hmm.
of exhale, the things that you're probably teaching students to do,
Mm-hmm.
and then be able to kind of reset and hopefully have your own world apart from that and then go back in. That's phenomenal that you've been doing that for 20 years. That is an incredible skill to learn.
Yeah.
It's not just about having heart, but it's also about having those energetic boundaries and those space boundaries as well.
Yes.
So I thank you for your service because
Thank you.
I'm a mental health therapist. I couldn't do it in the public schools. There's no
Yeah.
way that I could do it the way that you do. And especially nowadays, right? It's just not the same in schools like it used to be. Some things are the same. We're going to have kids that are struggling who are acting out, and then that's harming other students in many ways. And then we have, students that we're seeing a big rise in suicide rates for teens and adolescents right now. I don't expect you to have all the answers, but just from your experience, what you're seeing, and just from your own opinion, really, and what comes through to you is what are you noticing about students right now? Like what is going on where students are struggling so much in this way that it's leading to this kind of outcome, the most fatal, life ending, no turning back kind of outcome. What's happening? I think so many of us are perplexed about what's happening in kids' lives right now that's going on with leading to this.
Well, we see the research and we see all the data that correlates, social media with an increase in anxiety. Social media can be harmful, right? Kids are so engrossed in their phones and what they're seeing on the internet that it does impact them. They have this, they compare themselves to what they're seeing on the internet, what they're seeing on social media. And the phone usage is just completely out of control. And one of the things that our school does is we actually have what's called a no cell phone policy. So when students enter into the classrooms every day, they have to put their phones into a phone home. And the teacher makes sure that every student's phone is placed within the phone home. That way they could be attentive, they can be in the classrooms and not looking at their phone. I don't remember the exact statistics, but there's something that says like kids are looking down at their phone almost like it's just a crazy amount of times per every minute. And it's a big distraction. So yeah, we definitely see an uptick in mental health issues because of cell phone use, because of social media. And then a lot of it is just like, from what I see on a day-to-day basis, is a lot of this need to feel like a perfectionist, right? Like these high performance students who really feel the pressure of being academically at the highest level that they can be and not really knowing how to balance that, right? Not really having the skills just yet to balance academics and social relationships and being a part of the school community, like extracurricular activity or club or sport. So just finding that balance and having the executive functioning to deal with all of these things can be very difficult too.
And we have kids who are truly isolated, who are truly, truly isolated, who are saying, I don't have any friends at school. And parents are feeling so helpless around that. I mean, I know I have experienced that as a parent before. I've experienced that as a kid too. I just didn't tell my parents, but kids are just going to school and literally not having anyone at all to talk with. And in some places, they don't have school systems and schools that are supportive in their structure, the infrastructure, as far as having social workers who are there actually every single day that are available to support students. I know where I live in my little part of the world, the social worker moves around to different schools. They're not just staying at one school.
Mm-hmm.
And the counselors here in this area are more focused on college applications, supporting clubs, scheduling kind of stuff is a big thing. And so those kinds of things are happening quite a bit where the mental health support isn't necessarily there. So, I'm not saying you have all the answers, but if you happen to have any kind of insight or suggestions on what parents can do when their kid is saying like, no one talks to me at school, what can we do?
Well, the thing is finding out what are the extracurricular activities that the kids can get involved in, because no matter the resources, most schools have clubs and after school activities, before school activities that kids can tap into. And we want to celebrate different types of clubs. So we have here in my school, like leadership clubs. We have clubs that celebrate diversity. We have clubs for robotics, science club, biology club. But the thing that I love, and when we think about that sense of belonging, we have like a Latinx club. We have a MENA club, which MENA is Middle Eastern North African club. We have what's called PALS, the Pan Asian Leadership Society. We have a club called Black Leaders Union. There's just a plethora of clubs here. So there is something for every student in my school. And so it's just a matter of what do you like to do? There's a friendship bracelet club, right? There's a Frisbee club. So it's how do you find the person to connect the students to these clubs? And funny enough, it was Tuesday. I was at a school meeting after school. We looked at we started with sophomores and we looked at all the sophomores who weren't tapped into a club. And we pulled up their names to see, do you know these students? How can we get them connected? So the idea is even the students who aren't connected in some type of club at school or an activity at school, how can we pair them with a mentor or someone, a trusted adult in the building that they can feel a sense of connection to?
Yeah, that is an amazing resource, honestly, that I had not thought of. because I don't specialize in schools. And I think counselors and administrators who are listening to this could really utilize if they haven't already. Because what I love is that let's not wait for it to present itself as isolation. Let's not wait for isolation to present itself. Let's go ahead and be proactive about it and look at who's not involved in some kind of extracurricular activity, whether it's an after school or a sport or a club. Let's look at who's not involved and let's get on top of that right now. Creating that kind of mentorship, whether it's a one-on-one, that's interpersonal belonging, right? Or whether it's connecting with a community for community belonging. That is everything.
It is. I'm really proud of the work we're doing here. Another thing that we do every Thursday, not every Thursday, once a month, we have what's called Wellness Thursdays. So every teacher in the building, every classroom during the same time is learning a new social emotional topic, right? Whether it's setting boundaries or time management. And then the following Friday in the lunch periods, the social workers set up booths and we do fun activities to just kind of continue to enhance the skill that they learn. And then we have people in the community come in, like libraries and other organizations, to set up booths so that kids can see what else is going on in the community. And they kind of buy into the theme that we have and have resources about that. So it's really bringing in the community too, because the reality is some kids are connected outside of school, right? Whether it's with their churches or other organizations. So we don't want to assume that just because a kid's not in a club or if they're not in a sport, that they don't have community outside of school. But we do try to bring in community resources so that kids can know like how to tap into other things in their communities.
Yeah. I've had a kid who really didn't have any friends at school at all. At times there were none, but is tapped into music, theater, friends from a previous school, that kind of thing. It doesn't help getting through the day, but it certainly helps after that end of the day where it's not that loneliness afterwards as well.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, maybe I can't hang out with these kids anymore or at all, or I don't really connect with them. But at least I have some folks that I know I can, when Friday comes around, I can hang out with on the weekend. And that's enough to kind of, fill the tank to get through the next week. And so, for us as parents, we've stayed on top of like, hey, so what are your plans this weekend? What are you up to for the next couple of weeks? How's band going? That kind of thing. And it does make a difference. They don't have to love every minute of school, right? But when we look at their lives in a more holistic kind of way, what I'm hearing from you is that we need to take that into consideration as well and not obsess over like, you have to love every minute of school.
Right.
One of the things that I hear from a lot of parents too is that they can tend to pathologize their own kids. And they're like, but are you trying? But did you try to talk to Susie Q? It's just like, yeah, Susie Q is being an asshole, So that is, I don't know. What do you have to say to that as far as supporting parents, as far as like in their mentality around that? And it comes from love, right? It's coming from love.
It comes from love. It does. But when you talk to these parents, you'd see that, oh, wow, I see where this is coming from. Parents they don't always understand that they are oftentimes the reason why kids are performing the way they are, the reason why they're anxious, because parents are often pathologizing their kids or having too many high expectations. Like we just spent the last 2 days in parent-teacher conferences, and I have parents popping into my Zoom link to check in with me about their students who are overachieving. They have all A's in the highest classes, but they still want more. Like, dude, like, what is it more that you want? Like your kid's doing well. And that's when that anxiety comes in. That's when we see that perfectionism come in that actually starts pouring out in other ways in social situations and feeling too anxious to do anything because of the high expectations that parents put on them. And so I often spend a lot of time having conversations with parents and how can we meet in the middle? How can you stop monitoring grades so much and start focusing more on what is it that your child needs? How's their mental health? Let's quit focusing so much on academic. How's their mental health doing? And in the state of Illinois, every student gets 5 mental health days. And I love that. And I encourage my students to use your mental health day. It doesn't count towards their absence, because mental health is real. And we are now in a world where we're normalizing mental health, where we're breaking the stigma that, something must be wrong with you if you need support.
5 mental health days.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Let me tell you what.
Is.
I have a line. We all have these kind of narratives about ourselves. And one of my many lines is that, I would never go back to high school.
Oof,
and
never.
You know what? I'm telling you what, if I did, I'm coming back to yours.
Oh,
that sounds
awesome.
amazing. I mean, the work
awesome.
that you're doing sounds really amazing, and that you're really cultivating connection. And cultivating connection is like,
yeah.
I mean, that is a life well lived if you're able to do that.
Yeah. Because when you have those connections, you don't have to worry about students being off task or students running to the nurse's office because they don't feel seen and they're trying to hide, that safety behaviors that happen when you have anxiety. You're hiding, you are hiding in the bathrooms, you're going to the nurse's office. When you feel accepted at school, you want to be there. You know that you have teachers who respect you and you feel accepted, and the inclusion and support is there. And so a lot of it too, to me, what I see is when teachers aren't trauma informed, that's when a lot of issues come up. The biggest thing I hate is when I have a teacher who will email me or come to my office and say, "Oh my God, this kid is so attention seeking. They are disrupting the class." And I don't know who termed this. I can't take credit for it, but I love the term connection seeking and not attention seeking. Kids who are looking for connections, right? And so what are you doing in your classroom to make that student feel connected instead of coming down and saying that they're having behavioral issues or learning issues? Because when we know that kids have trauma, it might show up as disruptive, or it may show up as not caring or lack of focus or paying attention. And we're so quick to want to get this kid an IEP and label them with ADHD, when really the symptoms are symptoms of trauma. So one of the things my school is trying to do is just help teachers become more trauma informed, right?
Because the thing with trauma is that when we have trauma in the brain, and that fight or flight in the most primitive way, right, gets activated, then the executive functioning starts to shut down.
Absolutely.
All non-essential functions in the body start to shut down. And executive functioning is that higher level learning and planning and execution of ideas and creativity. All of that starts to become impacted because for our survival, it's really not essential.
Right.
And so when that part of our brain starts to get activated, which trauma makes us more prone to that, then it's going to be harder to learn. Ultimately, It's going to be harder to be creative. It's going to be harder to stay focused and have attention. And all of those key things can look like, various things, like you said, like behavior problems or ADHD. It's not to say that there's not ADHD involved, but it certainly gets exacerbated by trauma. And so,
Absolutely.
having that lens is really, really important. And so we all know when we're coming across that teacher that we don't say, "Oh, the teacher is not trauma informed." We might not necessarily say that, but we might say like, "Oh, this teacher's kind of more old school style," or "This teacher's not really holistic," or "This teacher doesn't understand like the whole person, is not seeing my kid as a whole human, but seeing them more as like the student that needs to be on task all the time." And so what do we do as advocates, right? As parents, when we are coming across that kind of parent, when we're coming across that kind of, or interacting with that kind of teacher. And I'll be honest with you, oftentimes it can be like the whole administration is like that. What do we do?
We just, part of the social worker's job is to educate. We've had professional development trainings for teachers to let them know the signs and symptoms of trauma, to let them know what to look for in the classroom, and more importantly, how to have a classroom that can feel safe, that can feel like it's okay to be in here. And so we have fidgets in the classroom. So if a student needs a fidget, to go and grab a fidget and not to be quick to send that student out. But how can we keep them in class and have the lights dim, using mindfulness daily in the classroom? So one of the things that we try to do is have teachers do some activities before the lesson starts. And more teachers are incorporating SEL into the classrooms. And it doesn't matter if you're a history teacher, a math teacher, or a science teacher. Social emotional learning belongs into the classroom, and kids need to learn ways to cope and regulate.
SEL, socio emotional learning, a term that we all need to familiarize ourselves more and more with, because it's saying when we're talking about the whole person, that's really what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's really connecting different parts of ourselves, specifically, kids these days. So here's kind of shifting gears a little bit, but along the same lines, when we kind of look at the flip side of this, is that we're seeing teachers leaving in mass exodus from schools.
Mm-hmm.
One of my kids had 4 teachers in 1 year.
Yeah.
4 in 1 year. Talk about disruptive to learning. I don't think that we're taking care of our teachers in the public school system. What are your up close, though? What are you seeing, Khalida?
Self-care in education is just so important. And there's a big teacher burnout. Teachers, their mental health is at stake. And, when you have an administration who don't support that, then it's easy to leave. And unfortunately, we are seeing an increase in behavioral issues in the classroom. And when you don't feel supported and you don't feel like you have those tools to deal with that, then teachers they're leaving, right? They're leaving and they're starting new careers. Teachers become dysregulated themselves. And I tell teachers, a dysregulated teacher can't help a dysregulated student, right? And so you have to have admin who buys into supporting teachers. And, like my school, we have different apps that are paid for that we can tap into, like the Calm app, in Headspace, and just making sure you're celebrating teachers and thanking them, yesterday and today we're in parent-teacher conferences, and, the school's providing us dinner, just the way it was like, take a break throughout, decompress, dinner's on us, like really celebrating who your teachers are and coming in and making sure that they feel seen and heard, because it really is hard.
Yeah. Especially when you're not at a school like where you are, or you're not in a state like where you are.
Correct.
That's not doing those kinds of things. There's not creating that sense of really safety and support for teachers as well.
Mm-hmm.
And administrators oftentimes also, they're not getting a lot of times the funding. So a lot of times they're relying on like the PTAs or the PTSAs, for, parent teacher and student associations or parent teacher associations for funding to be able to provide tenders to the
mm-hmm.
teachers and to the staff for things like this. So if you're able to either, volunteer monetarily or volunteer your time, which a lot of us can't do that, and that's fine too. There are other ways. Then it sounds like that's kind of a call to action for many of us, particularly in those places where teachers are not being supported. And maybe ask the teachers and ask the administration, like, how are teachers being supported here?
Yes, absolutely.
Time. Ask those questions. Yeah.
Even if you tap into like the EAP, most insurance covers EAP programs where you can get some free sessions. Like, take care of yourself. It's just a lot dealing with kids every day. It's heavy, right? And if you're not taking care of yourself, then you're not going to be any good to the students.
Right. And I will say, in North Carolina, at least, if you're a state employee and you participate in the state employee health insurance, then you actually get free for most of the plans. For the vast majority of the plans, you get free health insurance. I'm sorry. Let me start over. You actually get free mental health services.
Okay.
So we have tons of state employees who come to NOR Counseling for services, because so many of us are also former educators or current educators, and their services are free. So take advantage of that, folks.
Absolutely.
If you have that, check into the health insurance that you have. But, we don't do everything quite right here, but I'm really glad that our state employees across the board, not just teachers, are able to have that. And that actually changed during COVID. And so I'm wondering, along the lines of COVID, Lita, what have you noticed about the culture of students and connection and belonging since COVID happened?
Well, the good thing is I think we're on an uptick now, right? Like last year, I got to see the graduating class that started with COVID, right? The freshmen who came in when COVID first hit, and then they graduated last year. But definitely during that time, there was just so much loss of connection. There was so much learning loss. There was so much social connections being lost. And so kids were really struggling. That's when we did see an increase in anxiety and depression, and not just because of loneliness, but because families were forced to be together, right? And some homes had really unhealthy things going on, right? There was a lot of abuse that was being witnessed in homes, a lot of substance abuse. So there was a lot going on during COVID. And so kids would come to school and we would see a lot of kids struggling. But on my end, it seems like kids are almost like this sense of normalcy again. And even though there definitely are always going to be mental health disorders, I think that kids are finding their way again. They are, joining more clubs. They are feeling a little bit more connected with each other. But apart from the learning loss, we saw so much disconnect with kids. And just the social anxiety was a really big factor of that too.
Yeah. Yeah. It was huge. Because really, again, back to that socio-emotional learning aspect, so much of that period of time, just psychosocially, that period of time of like being a teenager, a young teenager, and during adolescence, is that time where we're really, really starting to dig deeper into how to make social connections and how to regulate our emotions and how to deal with conflict. And, that conflict piece could be really, really tough if people are wondering, like, why do my kids have social anxiety? The thing that I've noticed, at least in talking with kids, is that they didn't really learn those conflict resolution skills and those communication skills in their relationships with peers or even with teachers, right? And so there's a part of them that feels unsafe socially because they didn't equip themselves with those skills. They didn't have the opportunity to. So they're going into these it felt the arena for them, right? Like all this like mass of kids and people. And it feels scary. It's like, I don't trust myself to work well with others or to deal with any potential conflict. What are you noticing with that?
Definitely noticing the same thing, especially with just like, how do I get back into the swing of things and do this? Like kids literally forgot how to even have simple conversations. So a couple of years ago, there was a lot of social skills groups that I was running and helping kids just even learn the different nuances of being social. How do you start conversations? How do you invite others to come over and hang out again? Like kids really lost that. And so I am seeing, like I mentioned earlier, that things are getting better, except now, and I think that's when we saw the increase in cell phone usage and the increase of kids using social media and Instagram and Snapchat. And so that is one of the reasons why we saw the uptick in depression and anxiety.
Yeah. One of the things that I did, because my kid would get so anxious about this when I first started asking them to do it, was schedule your own doctor's appointments, schedule your own, I'm not talking about sick appointments if they're sick, but your own dentist appointment. So I would be there coaching, but they'd be like, I don't know what to say. It was like a 16-year-old. I don't know what to say. I'm like, that's okay, and I wouldn't make fun or anything. There's no shaming. It's like, you didn't really have the opportunity to learn this, So that's okay. You're going to say, hello, my name is so-and-so. I'd like to schedule my next cleaning, for teeth. And they're like, wait, what? And literally would have to practice it.
Yeah.
And we did that over and over and over again for different things. If they're just like, can we go eat at so-and-so? I'm like, call and see if they have reservations available. They're like, what? Can we just look online? I'm like, yeah, we could, but just call. Like, that'll be kind of nice and fast. Just give them a quick call. So having them, sometimes it wasn't a quick call, having them hold learning
Mm-hmm.
to stay on hold on the phone. Like some of these old school things, like a lot of the things that we learned and a lot of the messaging we got growing up wasn't really that great, but we
Right.
also did learn a lot of great skills in terms of like survival and how
Mm-hmm.
to just do the day to day living stuff. Right. And even things like when people would come to the door, whether it was, a delivery or whether it was a friend dropping by. I have my kid answer the door, something simple like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that just kind of like trains the brain of like, we can survive this.
Yes.
So I don't know if you have any tips or tricks like that, but those are some that just came to mind for me.
No, those are all great things to do. And I've even like practiced with kids, like calling a pizza place and ordering pizza,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yes.
just those basic things that kids, you would think would know, but they don't, right? And so
Yeah.
we just got to remember that there was a lot that was lost over the last few years, and we got to be
Yeah.
patient and give them grace as we help them deal with these things and learn these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you seeing for the future coming up for kids in terms of their ability to create connection, to foster more, belonging in the school system? Um, do you see things getting better?
We have to believe that things are going to get better, right?
Have to.
We have just to believe that things are getting better, and we have to make sure that we are trying to reach every student and whatever that looks like, right?
Yeah.
It's especially just celebrating kids and building those connections in the classroom so that they feel like school is a place that they want to come to every day. And if
Yeah.
schools aren't doing that, then we're going to see, the absences, the fears of coming to school. So, I just believe that things are going to get better. I see that things have gotten better, and we just have to create more opportunities and give kids, exposure to different things and celebrating different cultures and making sure that we see that in the classrooms, right? Pedagogy it should look like kids should see themselves in their curriculums. And when you have teachers that understand that and celebrate that, kids are going to just want to be a part of themselves. We want to
Yeah.
celebrate all cultures and have them be a part of their curriculums. Yeah.
Yeah. Because then that would make such a difference in feeling that connection, less isolation,
Mm-hmm.
again, in the classroom where you're able to see yourself reflected, not just in the people that are right there in front of you, but in the topics that we're discussing and talking about. And look, I truly am with you. I believe that things can get better, and I have to believe that. And I also think it's not going to happen on its own. We
Right.
have to show up because there are a lot of people out there who are trying to make sure that it doesn't get better for certain kids and that it doesn't get better for certain populations. And so we got to show up. We got to show up for our kids at home, checking in with them, having hope, I think, showing them like, it's okay, we're going to get through this instead of like toughen up and get over it,
Right.
but the sense of like, let's figure this out together,
Yeah.
know?
And having conversations at home where you are really checking in with your kid, right? We live in
Really
this
checking in.
microwave society. Everything is so fast paced. We want a quick fix to everything. Let's slow down and actually see how our kids are doing and have
Yes.
conversations that's not always centered around academics, but really get to know who your kid is. I have so many students who tell me like, my parents don't know this about me. My parents have no idea who I am or what I like. So like, really know your kids and come from a place of being curious about who your kids are and not
Yeah.
judging them. Kids are like chameleons. They're going to change from day to day. They're going to like rap music this week and next week they're going to be in the country. That's just how they are. That's how teens work. That's how
Right.
kids work. And just really being curious and celebrating who your kids are.
Yeah. Like, what do you like about rap music? What do you like about country music? That if it's flavor of the week, that's fine.
Right.
Being really curious isn't just like, what do you like, but what do you like about it? What does that mean to you? What got you into it? What stands out to you? Like if you had to pick a favorite, what would it be? Why? Going deeper and deeper and deeper, like you're getting to know anybody else, because just like you said, our kids are ever changing, right? Which is really like what we hope for all of us, like to be in touch with this this part of us that's ever evolving, this curiosity about ourselves where we're like, oh, wait, maybe I like this. Maybe I like that. We could really learn from our kids about their own natural curiosity and how they're trying on things for size. And if that's something that's ever changing for them, then there's always somebody new to get to know.
Yes.
Right. So let's constantly ask them. Let's constantly ask them those questions. I love that, Cleta. I really, really do. That curiosity. And like you said, I would say not even just cultural competence, but cultural humility, meaning like the assumption that I don't even know what's going on in your world, even your own child. But also that cultural centeredness where like, I'm going to center all these different aspects of you that make you, and your culture doesn't necessarily completely translate over to your kids' culture. Like you can share some things, but they can have some different things too. They're from a different generation, for example. Like we're not all the same. The Gen Z mind is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
It really, really is.
One of the things that I tell my parents, and I even did myself as a parent, is when my kids actually talk to me about things that were like shocking, I try my best not to react. And I would say, am I listening or am I giving advice? Because sometimes they don't want the advice. Sometimes they just want to be listened to. And parents are so quick to give advice on what they think should happen or become judgmental. And then that's when we see kids don't come back, right? So like when I ask students, have you talked to this about to your parents? No, oh, no way. I can't talk to them about this though, And so, I would just get in the habit of saying, am I listening or am I giving advice? And if you need to give advice, maybe come back a day later, like, hey, remember the conversation we had yesterday? I'd like to just talk a little bit more about that. And here's what I'm thinking. But in the moment, take time and just be present and listen. Some of the best conversations I have with my kid is on a trip to McDonald's, like just propping it up and listening to him and just like taking it all in. And when you do that, they'll come back to you more and more.
And it goes back to that microwave culture that you're talking about, but also like this urgency culture is what I'm hearing. And so, if I have to take anything from this conversation, for me, it's like learning to press pause.
Yes.
Right? Like really learning to press pause. And I'm loving what you're saying too, Khalida, about not always giving advice, especially right then in the moment. Sometimes we need to give some guidance, right? But it doesn't have to be right then in that moment.
Right.
But also instead of being like, oh, do this, and that. One of the things that come into mind is maybe to ask, I did this the other day with my kid. It's like, maybe I had a parent win. I've had a lot of L's though, let me tell you. But where I was like, what are you going to do next time then if that happens? Like asking them what they want to do about this when this conflict, happens. There was like a conflict around communication with friends and all that at the gathering. Like, what are you going to do next time then? Somebody spills food all in your car. Like, how's that going to go? It's something that might seem minor, but was a huge deal at the moment.
Not minor at all.
Most things are at 17. But yeah, it's interesting to see like where their thought process goes and more cultivating their own curiosity as opposed to like, oh, just, cut and paste from my life experience to yours, It's not going to be the same. So, okay, Khalida, I'd love to hear this. And I'm really, really excited to hear your answer to this and your response. What does belonging mean to you?
Wow. I think for me, belonging means being able to be who you are, showing up who you are in your true authentic self, and knowing that it's okay. Knowing that when you walk into a room, you can be who you are and that you're going to feel accepted. You're going to feel connections. Belonging to who I am as a social worker therapist. How do I feel belonging there? How do I feel belonging in my relationship as a wife? How do I feel belonging as a parent? So it's just like across so many different domains. But I think for me at the end of the day is, do I feel like I'm accepted? So I think belonging for me is acceptance.
Even if they don't get everything about you, even if they don't have to know all the different things about you, that walking in, that you're going to be accepted. And that all those other things, understanding and really seeing you and celebrate you, all of those things can come later, but it has to sit on that foundation of acceptance first.
Yeah. And there's going to be some spaces and places that aren't going to be accepting of who I am. And that's okay too. But at the end of the day, how do I feel about myself? Do I accept who I am? Because, unfortunately, there are going to be those times where people don't accept who you are. And when that happens, find your communities that do. And find those. Yeah.
Or find those, you started to say.
What was I going to say? Or just find those communities who do accept you and make sure you're being around people who are pouring into you and don't feel like you're being depleted, right? And so really being in places where you can feel just good. We're in a crazy time right now in the world. There's a lot of uncertainties. And the thing that we need the most is connectedness and belonging.
Yep. And what I hear from you too is that if you have that full self-acceptance, then you can feel belonging anywhere you go, whether you're accepted or not, because you at least belong to yourself.
To yourself.
First and foremost.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
So
and that's what I love about your model. Like, do you feel belonging to yourself? Do I belong to myself? Do I embrace myself? And absolutely I do. It's been a while, but I do.
It's hard fought, right?
Yeah.
It can be really hard fought, especially in spaces, where we, especially as women of color, where we go into a lot of spaces that don't accept us, but when we have that deep connection within, let me tell you, it's literally saved my life. Yes. It really, really has.
And that is why I loved meeting you. I felt like you were a sister from another mister immediately. Like, I just like that connectedness that we felt immediately. I felt like I've known you my entire life. And for, like you said, for women of color, that's so important. Thank you so much.
It is amazing. It's funny. It's relevant. It's, you have a way of like bringing in concepts with humor. And it's one of my favorite things, which is why you have a mass following. It's just so fun.
Thank you.
I adore you. Thank you for being here, Khalida.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. I can't wait to see what's next for you. I know you're doing some amazing things and can't wait to see it all come into fruition.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. All of the show notes and links can be found on my website at drmonanour.com. That's drmonanour.com. Throughout most episodes, you'll hear me referring to the belonging model that I developed, which is represented by a belonging life map that helps you explore areas in your life where you feel more connection and areas where you might feel more isolation. And you can get a free copy of your own belonging life map on my website. Again, that's drmonanour.com. If you like the Belonging Reimagined podcast, please subscribe and consider leaving us a review. That can help more folks find us and keep more episodes coming. Until next time, I'm Dr. Mona. You're right where you belong.